From Russia, Daria Vartalova and Alexei Svyatchenko. From Canada, Patricia Andrews.
A man picks up an underage girl every single morning before sunrise. So what exactly is that relationship? A senior and junior teammate, or something more? I'll let you decide that for yourself. But first, let's go back a little. Last week on this channel, we talked about the 7 years Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura spent together in a tiny kitchen apartment in Oakville, Canada. The story of Ryuichi cooking curry for Riku again and again. The story of Riku making omelets while Ryuichi complained about them, yet still ate every bite. Quiet moments in the kitchen late at night where nobody was watching, slowly turning into years of shared memories. After that video, thousands of comments came in. Some viewers said, "That's clearly a romantic relationship." Others said, "No, it's just years of deep trust between partners." And then one comment kept appearing over and over again. Tell us more about the morning rides. So today, that's exactly what we're talking about. The curry and omelet stories happened at night, but their life together didn't begin at night. It began every morning. Every single day started with Ryuichi getting behind the wheel. And today, we're going to carefully look at what those mornings really meant. In August 2019, Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura moved to Oakville, Ontario, Canada to train. Their coaches and training bases were different, but the two practiced at the same rink. There was just one problem. Ryuichi lived alone in an apartment, but Riku was still only 17 years old, a minor, so she had to stay with a host family. They lived separately, but they still had to get to practice every day together. And in Canada, that wasn't simple. In Ontario, even though teenagers can begin the licensing process at 16, getting a full driver's license takes time. And at that point, Riku couldn't legally drive on her own yet, which meant she had no reliable way to get from her host family's house to the rink by herself. Sure, buses technically existed, but public transportation in suburban Canada isn't like Japan. In towns like Oakville, living without a car is incredibly difficult. So Ryuichi made a decision. Every morning, he drove to her host family's house to pick her up. Nobody forced him to do it. The coaches didn't order it. It wasn't written into any contract. He simply decided that he would be the one to make sure she arrived safely. A senior skater, 9 years older than her, started every day by driving his 17-year-old partner to practice. And what's interesting is, even after Riku eventually learned how to drive herself, the routine never really disappeared. Out of 365 days in a year, they spent around 360 together. And every single morning ride became the starting point of that life. Of course, you can explain this very logically. A more experienced senior helping a younger partner. A practical decision for the team. A responsible act of care toward a minor teammate. And honestly, all of that is true. But I want you to stop and think about something for a moment. Before practice even began, Ryuichi was already parked outside her house, waiting for Riku to walk out the front door. And during those quiet minutes in the car, what was he thinking about? Was he scrolling through his phone, listening to music, or maybe just staring out the windshield in silence? Because mornings reveal people in their most honest state. Before makeup, before the public mask, before people become the version of themselves they show the world. For athletes especially, mornings are emotional. Your body still carries yesterday's exhaustion. Your mind already fears today's training. If competition is close, anxiety is already there before the day even begins. And every morning, Ryuichi was the very first person to see that version of Riku. The sleepy version of her. The exhausted version. The nervous version standing outside the host family's front door before sunrise. And at the exact same time, Riku also saw him first every morning. Ryuichi waiting in the car with the engine running. Not a coach, not a parent, just someone who came there specifically for her. That routine continued for months, then years. Inside that small car, conversations slowly grew. Silences grew too. Laughter became natural. Even the tired mornings started feeling normal. And little by little, those unseen moments before practice became part of their everyday life together. Now, technically, yes, it was just transportation. One person driving another person to the rink, that explanation is completely valid. But when most people imagine someone picking up the same person every morning, what kind of relationship usually comes to mind? A senior and junior teammate? Or something else? Again, I'll leave that up to you. Then in 2021, everything changed. Riku moved out of her host family's home and into the same apartment building as Ryuichi. Not the same room, but the same building. And suddenly, the morning routine changed too. There was no longer any need for Ryuichi to drive across town to pick her up. Now they only had to walk downstairs, knock on a door, meet in the hallway, but even after that, they still went to practice together every single morning. They left the building together, got into the same car together, started every day together. And honestly, after moving into the same building, that habit became even more natural, because now their entire day flowed together. Think about this alongside last week's kitchen story. After 2021, nights were spent eating together in the kitchen. Mornings were spent driving to practice together. From sunrise to nighttime, their lives became one continuous routine. Yes, technically you can call that the life of skating partners. But when two people spend nearly 360 days a year together, leave together in the morning, eat together at night, and build an entire daily rhythm around each other, what would most people call that kind of life? What would most people call a relationship like that? Again, I'll leave that to your imagination. Then came 2022. Right before a competition, Riku Miura dislocated her left shoulder during practice. That morning probably began like every other morning. Ryuichi Kihara likely met her downstairs like always. They probably walked out of the building together like always. But then the accident happened. And afterward, there was the drive home. What did the atmosphere inside that car feel like that day? The same road, the same car, but carrying a completely different kind of weight. As Ryuichi held the steering wheel, what was running through his mind? What was Riku feeling in the passenger seat? Last week, we talked about the kitchen that night. But nobody has ever talked about the silence inside that car on the way home. Only two people know what happened in that moment, and neither of them has ever spoken publicly about it. So once again, I'll leave it to your imagination. Then, in 2023, Ryuichi was diagnosed with lumbar spondylolysis, a serious lower back injury. He had to withdraw from multiple competitions. During rehabilitation, he could no longer drive Riku to practice every morning. And suddenly, a routine that had existed since 2019 stopped overnight. For the first time in years, Riku had to go to the rink alone. What did those mornings feel like for her? Imagine waking up and realizing the person who had always been waiting for you simply wasn't there anymore. Later, Riku said something unforgettable. If Ryuichi isn't there, being a pair skater has no meaning. Last week, we understood that quote through the lens of the kitchen stories. But today, when you hear it through the lens of those morning drives, the words feel heavier. Because maybe, if Ryuichi isn't there, wasn't only about skating. Maybe it also carried the loneliness of mornings where nobody was waiting for her anymore. Of course, technically she was talking about their partnership in competition. That much is true. But when someone who spent years starting every single day beside another person says, without him, it has no meaning, can those words really be only about scores and medals? Or are they also about the sudden emptiness of ordinary mornings? Eventually, Ryuichi recovered. The rehab ended. He returned to the ice. And with that, the morning routine returned too. They left the building together again, got into the same car again, drove to practice together again. What expressions did they have on that first morning back? What did they say to each other? Or maybe, did they say nothing at all? I'll leave that to your imagination too. Then came March 2025. On the flight home after becoming world champions in Boston, the two reportedly decided that the Milan Olympics would be their final season together. And on the 18th of February, 2026, after winning Olympic gold in Milan, cameras around the world captured a 30-second embrace on the ice. But inside those 30 seconds, there had to be years of memories. The dark winter mornings, the long drives, the image of Riku stepping out of the front door before sunrise while Ryuichi waited outside. All of those mornings were part of that embrace. Then came April 2026. After their retirement press conference ended, one journalist sat alone reviewing his notes. And there was one sentence he couldn't stop thinking about. Through tears, Ryuichi had said, "If Riku hadn't reached out to me, I would have already retired." Read that sentence slowly one more time. Back in 2019, Ryuichi was no longer standing on top of the skating world. A man who had already experienced 2 Olympic Games was working at a skating rink handling rental skates, polishing other people's shoes in the corner of the rink. He had lost sight of the future. His passion for skating was fading. And then, a message arrived from a 17-year-old girl. That message changed everything. Ryuichi moved to Canada, and every morning before sunrise, he started driving to pick her up. 7 years later, they became Olympic champions with one of the highest scores in history. So, when he says, "If Riku hadn't spoken to me, I would have retired," is that only a skating story? Or is it something deeper than that? A single message from a teenage girl changed the course of a man's entire life. And for the next 7 years, that man continued picking her up every single morning. What do you call the connection between those two things? Once again, I'll leave that to your imagination. During the retirement press conference, Ryuichi broke down in tears. Even though he had prepared a speech beforehand, his voice started shaking halfway through. For nearly 30 seconds, he couldn't continue speaking. And quietly, sitting beside him, Riku said, "Please don't cry." That sentence cannot be ignored, not in last week's kitchen story, and not in today's story about the morning drives. Because those words came from the exact same kind of closeness. You don't tell someone, "Please don't cry," unless you already know your voice can reach them. That kind of comfort doesn't exist between distant people. Riku said those words to the man who had been the first person to see her every morning for years. So what kind of relationship creates a sentence like that? Of course, you can say it was trust built through years as skating partners. And honestly, that explanation is completely valid. But after hearing "Please don't cry," Ryuichi took a deep breath and continued speaking. "Thank you for the past 7 years." Those words were directed at Riku. And inside those 7 years were hundreds of mornings. The dark roads before sunrise. The mornings waiting outside the host family's house. The silent drive home after her shoulder injury. The lonely winter mornings when Riku had to go to practice alone while Ryuichi recovered from his back injury. All of those memories were inside his thank you. After the press conference, Ryuichi posted a single photo on social media. Outside the car window stretched a massive American highway. The caption contained only 2 Japanese characters, "Freedom," and it was confirmed that Riku left a comment on that post. The comment itself was never made public, but even the day after retirement, the two were still connected. Retirement may have ended their competitive career, but something between them clearly continued beyond the screen of a smartphone. Meanwhile, Riku returned to her hometown of Takarazuka. In an interview, she said, "For a while, I just want to sleep and do nothing." Think about that for a moment. After spending nearly 360 days a year together for 7 straight years, suddenly comes the first night apart. And then comes the first morning where nobody is waiting outside anymore. What did that morning feel like for her? She opens the front door, and the car that was always there is gone. The car wasn't there anymore. Something that had felt completely normal for 7 straight years suddenly no longer existed. Honestly, I don't even know what word describes that feeling. And maybe Riku Miura didn't know either. Maybe that's exactly why she said, "For now, I just want to sleep." I'll leave that to your imagination too. But what makes this story even more interesting is what happened next. Even though Riku said she wanted to disappear from everything and simply rest, only 2 weeks after announcing retirement, on the 1st of May 2026, she was already back on the ice again. And standing beside her was Ryuichi Kihara. In front of a sold-out crowd of 2,503 people at a rink in Hyogo Prefecture, the two returned together. Nobody forced them to do it. There were no competition points at stake, no medals, no rankings. And yet, they came back to the same place again. The person who had said, "I just want to sleep," returned to the ice only 2 weeks later. Why? If you asked them that question today, they would probably answer the same way they always do. I'll leave that to your imagination. The performance was called Blue Ice. During the show, Ryuichi lifted Riku into the air once again. Not for judges, not for scores, not because someone needed to evaluate them. He lifted her simply because that was still what the two of them did together. And as always, Riku trusted his hands completely. The audience held their breath. The movements looked exactly the same as they did during competition. But at the same time, something had changed. The performances were no longer about winning. In the same way their morning drives changed form after retirement, their skating changed form too. But one thing never changed. Ryuichi still lifted Riku. After the performance ended, Riku took the microphone and said something that stunned many fans. "In pair skating, I believe meeting your partner is destiny." Notice something important here. Nobody forced that word into the conversation. A reporter didn't suggest it. No interviewer led her there. Riku chose that word herself. Destiny. A 24-year-old woman described meeting a man 9 years older than her as destiny. Think back to July 2019. A teenage girl sent a single message to a man she barely knew. And years later, she looked back on that meeting and called it destiny. Inside those 7 years were hundreds of morning drives, dark roads before sunrise, silent car rides to practice. The routine of always being there for each other, those memories are what give weight to the word destiny. Then the two announced a brand new ice show together. The title? Destiny. The The show was scheduled for July 31st through the 2nd of August 2026 at Tokyo's Tachikawa Ice Arena. And once again, Riku explained the meaning behind the title herself. "I believe meeting my partner was destiny. That's why we chose this name." Meanwhile, Ryuichi explained the vision for the show. He said they wanted to use a full competition-sized rink. He wanted audiences to still feel the same speed and intensity as real competition. Even after retirement, he remained obsessed with giving the highest quality performance possible. And honestly, maybe I'm overthinking this, but doesn't that dedication feel strangely similar to those morning drives? The same quiet desire to create the best possible environment for Riku, the same consistency, the same care. The two also spoke about their future plans. They hope to earn coaching certifications and eventually create something called the Riku Ryu Academy. Even after retirement, even after losing the title of competitive athletes, their names still remain connected as one. Not Ryuichi Academy, not Riku Academy, but Riku Ryu Academy. And Riku said something else that stood out. "I want to help support Ryuichi's coaching." In other words, the girl who was once picked up every morning is still choosing to stay beside the man who came for her all those years. The form may change, but the closeness remains. Maybe the routine that began in autumn 2019 is still continuing today, just in a different shape. The morning drive simply transformed into traveling toward the same future together. So let's step back and look at the timeline one more time. Autumn 2019. The morning pickups begin. They move into the same apartment building and begin spending mornings and nights together. The painful drive home after Riku's shoulder injury. Ryuichi's back injury stops the morning routine for the first time. Then he recovers, and the routine returns. They become world champions in Boston and decide retirement is near. February 2026, Olympic gold in Milan. The unforgettable 3-0 second embrace on the ice. April 2026. Thank you for the past 7 years. Please don't cry. When you look at all of those moments as one continuous line, where did the story truly begin? Not with the Olympic gold medal, not with the world title. It began in autumn 2019. With a single car parked outside a host family's house before sunrise. That car became the starting point of a 7-year journey that eventually led to something called destiny. And honestly, after looking at that timeline, it becomes difficult to believe those morning drives were only about transportation. Can I share something personal for a moment? While researching this story, I kept thinking about one thing. When someone chooses to pick another person up every single morning, they are giving that person something incredibly valuable. Their time. Not because they're forced to, not because they gain anything from it, but simply because they want to spend part of their life making someone else's mornings easier. And when someone continues doing that for years, there's something inside that action more honest than words. When Riku said, "Meeting my partner was destiny," I immediately imagined the very first morning, autumn 2019, a dark street before sunrise. Ryuichi waiting inside his car, and a teenage Riku stepping outside the front door and seeing that car waiting for her. Maybe, just maybe, that tiny moment became the first page of a story that took 7 years to grow into something called destiny. Before ending this video, there's one important thing I need to say clearly. Everything discussed in today's video and in last week's video about the curry and omelets is based entirely on public interviews, press conferences, and confirmed media reports. These are real words spoken by Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura. Real events, verified facts. But at the same time, I also need to be honest about something. Questions like, were those morning pickups an act of love? Why did he keep cooking for her? What did "please don't cry" truly mean? The structure of this video intentionally encourages viewers to think deeply about those questions. And yes, that naturally creates a certain emotional impression. I should admit that honestly. But this channel is not trying to claim that the two are dating. And we are also not trying to claim they are not dating. We cannot know that. And more importantly, we should not pretend to know. The only people who truly understand their relationship are the two of them. And since they themselves continue saying, "We'll leave it to your imagination," we should respect that. Because in the end, the real story here isn't romance. It's the weight of 7 years. The memories of driving through dark mornings together. The memory of meals cooked late at night. The silent drives home after injuries. The years of supporting each other until they reach the very top of the skating world. No matter what kind of relationship they truly have, that fact will never change. Their story did not end when competition ended. Now it continues quietly in new forms. In destiny. In the dream of the Riku Ryu Academy. In whatever future they decide to build together next. And honestly, I think all we can do now is watch that future warmly from a distance. Supporting them does not give us the right to invade their privacy. So if, after watching this video, you still find yourself wondering, are they together? Then maybe the best answer is the same one Riku herself would give. I'll leave it to your imagination. But hopefully, that imagination is a warm one. A gentle image filled with 7 years of curry dinners, morning drives, and those unforgettable 30 seconds on the ice. And hopefully, whatever future waits for them next, it's a peaceful and happy one. If today's story stayed with you even a little, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. And in the comments, I'd love to hear your own imagination of their story. Your kind words are what keep this channel going.